On This Week in Hockey East, we're going to talk about a couple of huge non-conference tests. The defending champs at UNH, Denver, number 2 in the country, coming to town to take on 2 Hockey East teams. And how about a couple of top dogs looking to bounce back? That's all coming up on This Week in Hockey East. Hi, everybody. Welcome to week 3 of our program on This Week in Hockey East. Great to be with you once again. Eric Gallanty along with Tyler Murray. It's certainly been a first couple of weeks that have not lacked in storylines so far. There's a lot to talk about, maybe most notably UNH for what they did last week. And why don't we start right there with our Hockey East Game of the Week on NESN. 2 games that are coming up this weekend as New Hampshire plays host to the defending national champions in Quinnipiac. Tyler, you'll be there. What stands out to you about this game?
Yeah, you got ESPN Plus Friday, NESN on Saturday, and you have to go back to that incredible win UNH just had against BU. It's their first win over a national number 1 since upsetting Cornell in the 2003 Frozen Four, and they hadn't beaten BU since 2015 when Jack Eichel was on the team. They snapped a 12-game losing streak against BU. And for Mike Souza, I mean, if his team is hot, if they're cold, if it's up, if it's down, they are never scared, it seems, of these ranked teams. They were 6-3 in the second half last year against nationally ranked competition. We go to 2 years ago for the whole year, they were 6-6. And we said they hadn't beaten a number 1 since the early 2000s. But remember 2 years ago, or 3 years ago now, in the shortened COVID season, 2021 part of the year, they split a home-and-home with BC, who was number 2. By the end of the year, Boston College was number 1, and UNH almost knocked them off in that first-round playoff game. What really stood out, though, is the improved forward depth for UNH. They're not leaning so heavily on Liam Devlin and Silas Clare this year. Now, both of those guys did score in that win over BU last week, but Kristaps Graston scored a goal. Luke Reed had a big game-tying tally. And then Morgan Winters, who you may have forgot about because he was injured for the second half of last year, he was red hot before the injury. Comes back. It was his first game in 10 and a half months. He scores twice, including shorthanded. And then maybe more important than anything, Tyler Muslik, the former National Development Team program guy, he had one of his best starts yet for UNH. We've heard so much about Muslik putting in work during the offseason. He actually stayed on campus in Durham throughout the summer, working on how to read plays a little bit better. And his confidence is just miles ahead. You can tell just by watching him from last year. The example I'll give was he gave up 3 goals in the first period to BU. Terriers buzzing a little bit. And it feels like they're going to run away with things. But after the 3-goal first period, he only gave up 1 goal in the last 2 frames. And half of his 20 saves came in the third period. So I think Tyler Muslik could really be a game changer for UNH. But he'll be tested against Quinnipiac, of course, this week. If you want to beat the Bobcats, you have to neutralize Sam Lipkin, Jacob Quillen, and Colin Graff. All 3 sophomores last year. They combined for 140 points for Quinnipiac. That was 31% of the team's scoring. Now, they're all back as juniors, and they really broke out in a big way against AIC on Saturday. Those 3 guys combined for 12 points, 4 goals, and 8 assists. So I think UNH did an okay job neutralizing Lane Hudson. They gave up 2 goals to Macklin Celebrini, but the point is they're no stranger to try to shut down some marquee players in the opposing lineup. So it should be a great home series, 2 games in Durham against Quinnipiac this weekend.
I wonder if, in a weird way, the fact that you have Quinnipiac coming in, think about the emotions of that first night. You're playing the number 1 team in the country. It's the opener. You get that big win. I mean, we overuse the word letdown, but that's such a high off of that. To be able to then bring in the defending national champs right after that, you have to think the high and the buzz in the building is going to continue. So it's going to be really fun to see how UNH tries to continue to build momentum out of that first game of the year and that big win. I have to think it's not going to be 6 goals that wins the game, just the way that Quinnipiac tends to play. But hey, you never know.
Yeah, I mean, so many coaches this time of year talk about how nice it is to put on a good show for those early season crowds who are coming up, maybe to see BU, maybe to see what the new team looks like. So that's just a huge win for Mike Souza and that UNH program. And well, for Boston College, I mean, that's another team that's taken on a lot of really tough nationally ranked competition. The 2-1 overtime win against Quinnipiac. They're welcoming in Denver, and, you're going to get a top 5 matchup at Connie Forum, and Denver's also going to Providence, so that's going to be a pretty wild weekend as the Pios come back to New England.
Yeah, you got top 10 on Friday, top 5, really top 3 on Saturday. This is the same trip that Denver took 2 years ago, the year they won the national championship, where they played Providence and then Boston College on a Friday, Saturday. It's a lot of interesting things to talk about. Denver right back in the national conversation, no surprise, number 2 in the country right now. But I want to dive in on Providence a little bit. 3 games into their season, the split at Michigan, and then they played Stonehill and got a win in their opener this past week. The most encouraging thing out of Providence, though, is how they're finishing. This has been the story the last couple of years. Nate Lehman's talked about this. Providence so dominates the shot category year in and year out. They've been top 4 in the nation in shots per game the last 2 years. However, you can kind of pick whatever metric you want. If you look at scoring offense, though, they're down around 20th last year. They were down even lower than that, around 30th the year before. If you look at shooting percentage, just literally the amount of times that they shoot the puck and the puck goes in, Providence has not been higher than 37th the last 2 years, despite leading the country in shots. This year so far, their shot numbers are right back where they always are, and they're scoring. They've averaged 5 goals per game in the first 3. Their shooting percentage is over 10% for the first time in 2 years. It's actually at 13%. What do those numbers mean this early in the season? It's hard to know, but just in terms of the conclusion that it feels like this team is finishing their chances early in the year, that's huge. Providence has also been elite on the power play so far this year. They already have 4 power play goals, and all of those were against Michigan, so that's not even factoring in the Stonehill game. So that's really good news for Providence and how they handled Denver on Friday. Then Saturday, Denver goes into Boston College. By the way, these 2 teams will play RPI on the opposite days as it works out, both teams this weekend. But Saturday night will be the first top 3 matchup inside Conti Forum since 2011. It was also Boston College versus Denver. Kind of hard to believe. Sort of a weird game for the Eagles against LIU in some ways. They fell down 2-0, but then kind of blitzed the Sharks after that point, outshot them pretty heavily, scored 4 unanswered goals. Everybody's talking about that second line of the USA kids, whatever we want to call them. But the first line, really 1A, 1B, whatever you want to call it. But the Gasso, Gauthier, and then Jack Malone coming in as a grad transfer from Cornell on that first group has really performed well. They've scored 4 goals combined over the first 2 games. Gauthier is leading the country in shots, and it's really not close. He has 19 shots in 2 games. If you do the shots per game, he's far and away the leader in the country. So him coming back for that sophomore season, kind of like Lane Hudson, kind of like that Cale Makar guy from a couple of years ago, it stands out. Really building his full game. He's been dominating the first 2. It's going to be fascinating to watch how Boston College handles that. Both teams handle a really big weekend against a Denver team that is maybe a touch younger than they've been the last couple of years, but they bring in a huge freshman class. But you could argue it might be the deepest top to bottom freshman class. Maybe not the high end guys like BCBU, but really top to bottom. Denver's got as good a freshman class as anyone. It's going to be a lot of fun this weekend.
There's a lot of firepower on that Denver team, which is why it's important for BC to keep up what they've been doing on the penalty kill. 11 for 11 this year for the Eagles on the PK. And you mentioned the shot disparity late against LIU. Sharks had just 5 shots over the final 2 periods. That defense, it's in a bit of contrast to their arch rival, the BU Terriers, taking on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. 2 games in South Bend, Friday at 7, Saturday at 6. Jay Pandolfo said after the upset loss to UNH, the quote is, "I'm not doing a good enough job. I don't have our guys playing the right way." Now, that's a pretty harsh self-assessment. Obviously, a lot of accountability there from a former national champion for the Terriers. But I think a lot of fans looking toward the defensive side of things. It was exciting for BU, that line sheet last weekend, 7 dressed defensemen, all of them NHL draft picks, but UNH outshot BU 35-24 in that game. And for me, a lot of it goes to special teams. I mean, you have to imagine they're going to gel more as the season goes on. They're so young and they're so talented, but 0 for 3 on the power play on Friday, giving up a shorthanded goal, and then they gave up 2 power play goals. That all eventually decided the game. And BU still hoping for their first 5-on-4 goal of the season. Now, their lone power play goal was Lane Hudson 4-on-3 in overtime to beat Bentley 2 weeks ago now. And speaking of Lane Hudson, obviously a dynamic player. He was neutralized more than I think I've ever seen in person against UNH. That game had 10 goals. Hudson had an assist, but he did not have a shot on goal until the 3rd period. And in the end, he only had 2 of them. Macklin Celebrini kind of carried the load. He had his first career 2-goal game. But you're looking for BU to become, the sum of its parts at some point. And there was an interesting point in that game for BU. They scored back-to-back goals, Celebrini and then Tom Willander, first of his career. They scored 90 seconds apart late in the first period, and the Whittemore Center goes silent. It feels like, okay, this is the number one team. BU's about to blow us out. But then Luke Reed ties the game 30 seconds later. The crowd gets back into it. They never let up again. And it almost felt like BU, they figured, well, we scored 2 goals real quick. We can kind of rattle those off whenever we need to, but it just never really got back to that level offensively. And a young team, that they learn a hard lesson that in Hockey East, nothing really ever comes that easy. Just 1 goal for BU in the last 45 minutes of the game. But they're playing another young team in Notre Dame. The Fighting Irish, average age of 21 and a half. That's 10th youngest in the country. BU is 4th youngest in the nation. And both of these teams are very big. Notre Dame, an average weight of 195 pounds, which is the heaviest in the country. And that includes All-American goaltender Ryan Bischel. He's back for a 5th year. He's the active leader in career save percentage in the country. Jeff Jackson has more wins than any other active coach in the nation. And then we get to see Providence grad transfer Patrick Moynihan for Notre Dame. He entered the season as the NCAA active leader in power play goals. So, again, keep an eye on the BU special teams. And then lastly, BU and Notre Dame, we are going to see 6 sets of brothers on the ice this weekend, more than any other matchup we'll see all year. So BU, of course, has Lane and Quinn Hudson, Case and Gavin McCarthy, Macklin and Aiden Celebrini, and then Notre Dame, Trevor and Justin Janicki, Landon and Carter Slaggert, and then Henry and Danny Nelson. So maybe not the easiest game to broadcast. We'll be watching from afar, of course, but a lot of talent out there on the ice.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. And, we mentioned top dogs trying to rebound this week. It's also a theme because how about Merrimack, who beat Northeastern last week 1-0 on the women's side? Really impressive win for Merrimack. Callie Hogarth was outstanding, 29 saves and a shutout for Merrimack. I mean, you talk about now the next step here for Merrimack. They get Vermont, who comes in the following week. So after that huge Northeastern win, they then tied UNH the next day. Can they follow it up? When you have a goaltender, you certainly have a chance. And that's the big thing for Merrimack, not just their play and goal, but their shots that they've allowed are way down this year from last year. If you look at the numbers, they averaged 34 shots allowed a game last year. This year, they're only averaging 21.9. Again, it's early in the season, but that's a big difference. And if you can prevent some of the shots, obviously that prevents some of the scoring opportunities, so their goals allowed are down as well. That's the big thing for Aaron Hamlin's team. But off of a huge win, let's see if they can do it again this week. And exciting to see some of the updates that we've seen to Lawler Arena. Merrimack's played at home on the women's side, and then we'll kick off their home slate this week against Clarkson and St. Lawrence. So we're certainly very excited to see that. Let's do some short shifts here as we finish out our show. Again, there's no shortage of storylines to talk about when it comes to Hockey East. Tyler, why don't you start?
Yeah, a couple little history notes for the league. In Vermont, Steve Wiedler got his first win in his Catamounts head coaching debut. They beat St. Lawrence 3-1. Wiedler just the second coach to win their Vermont debut. He joins Bill Ruffer from 1963. Simon Yelush had his first career multi-goal game in that one. 37 saves for Gabe Carrier. Now, Vermont's off this week, and they've got plenty of time to gear up for Providence. 2 games at Schneider Arena on ESPN Plus for their first Hockey East test. And how about former Maine women's goaltender Mariah Fujimagari? She won a preseason game in the ECHL. She beat Toledo in overtime, so some barriers broken there. Now, not the first time it's happened for a former Hockey East player. A Merrimack coach, Aaron Hamlin, actually played for Toledo back in the 90s. So really cool stuff there, and wish them the best for Mariah Fujimagari.
Yeah, that was awesome to see on Sunday. Pretty cool story there. We mentioned the Merrimack women. Let's take the other side of it, right? Northeastern did not lose back-to-back games all season last year. They haven't done it since 2 years ago. They try to avoid that fate in a neutral site icebreaker weekend coming up. They will play a ranked St. Cloud team down at Sacred Heart to kick off their weekend. How does Northeastern bounce back? Again, they have not lost very much the last couple of years. When they have, it's tended to be these low-scoring 1-0, 2-0 shutouts, whatever they might be. So we'll see if Northeastern can get the offense going once again as they take on a good St. Cloud team down at that brand new, beautiful arena down at Sacred Heart.
We talked a lot about how Hockey East teams are more than willing to bring in tough non-conference competition. So we have to tip our cap to UMass. They upset number 6 Michigan on Saturday, coming off a 7-2 loss to the Wolverines on Friday. They're down 2-0 into the third period on Saturday. Now, UMass was playing well. They're drawing penalties, creating chances, but just nothing was going in. It felt like, all right, it's not our weekend if you're Greg Carville. But once Ryan Ufko scored on the power play, the floodgates opened, and UMass wound up scoring 6 goals in 15 minutes. So a huge win for them, a huge win for Hockey East, and a major development in goal. And Michael Hrabal, the freshman, second-round pick of the Coyotes, making his debut. He made 13 saves in the third period alone. Huge stops for Hrabal to keep him in the game in the second period. As Michigan gets one more, they're up 3-0. It feels like a much different scenario. And last year, UMass, I don't think they had a lack of talent in goal. It was just a lack of stability. They were rotating through 3 different guys. No one ever really took the job by the horns. I think Hrabal might have done that, or at least made the first step toward doing that with a big win over Michigan. 2 games at number 19 Minnesota State this weekend. So the gauntlet continues for UMass.
Yeah, I mean, UMass, Providence, we mentioned Michigan now playing Denver, Boston College. Even after this weekend, they'll play Michigan State. It's pretty cool to see the amount of these competitive non-conference games. BU's at Notre Dame. They'll have North Dakota in a couple of weeks. A lot of these Hockey East teams are playing the defending champs in Quinnipiac. A lot of good games this time of year, which has led to some massive attendance numbers early in the season. We maybe expect this in February and even the end of January, but amazing stuff this past week, and it's worth shouting out. Maine was sold out. UMass, that game you just mentioned, was sold out on Saturday against Michigan. Boston College, in their game on Friday against LIU, had the most students attendance in the history of Boston College hockey. They had over 3,800 students. That's 40% of the undergrads who were at that game, and that's even the week before RPI and Denver are coming into town. There's a lot of other games as well where buildings were full down in Providence. UConn was pretty full for Holy Cross. I could go deeper down the list. Attendance, not just in Hockey East, but around the whole country. But it's nice to see it on the rise again. And it's nice to see it from the student turnout as well as the greater whole. A lot of fun, and it speaks to the non-conference types of games that these teams are scheduling early on in the season. It's awesome to be in buildings with full houses. It's awesome to be in buildings with great games, and we're going to see some more of them this week. Thanks so much for joining us on This Week in Hockey East, and we'll see you next time.